Well, hello there, gang. Welcome to episode 95 of the 30. I'm your host, Patrick, and thank you for joining us on this another wonderful week, another wonderful day. Thank you so very much. If this is your first time joining us, make sure that you stay tuned and make sure that those of you that are new, those of you that are joining us every week, do what you do. Like and share the broadcast. Of course, the 30 is a production of the Jackman Group LLC. You can see or you can go to our website, jackmangroupllc.com. If you've missed any of our previous broadcasts, we stream live to 3 destinations: Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And you can check us out at any one of those 3 destinations. All of our broadcasts are on YouTube, so make sure that you go there. If you go there, make sure that you like the broadcast as well as subscribe to our channel. Well, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what we've decided to do at the 30, starting tonight and going on for the next, 4 weeks, yes, we will have discussions around mental health. I know in families around this country, around the city, around the world, we've all have someone or ourselves. We all know of someone that struggles with mental health. So we're going to highlight it and we're going to talk about it. We're going to have some discussions from tonight all the way through till the end of May. So make sure that you are, whether you're watching it live or in replay, make sure that you drop some comments or questions in the chat box so that we can get our guests over the next 4 weeks respond and answer to some of your questions. Tonight, we're going to start it out with men and mental health. So we're going to start that, and over the next 4 weeks, we're going to have specific topics, so you don't want to miss it. So we're going to get it started. We'll be back right after this. And as soon as we come back, you'll see 2 of my guests as we focus on men and mental health. Welcome again. We welcome you to the 30. Tonight we'll be talking about men and mental health as we begin our 4-week discussion around mental health as we look at May is Mental Health Awareness. So we're going to do our due diligence and bring light to this very, very important topic. If you have any comments or questions, make sure that you drop them in the comments box. Tonight, we have 2 great and wonderful guests. We're going to be talking tonight about men and mental health. And who else do we have? We have Carl Binger. Welcome, Carl. Carl is no stranger to the 30. He's been here around, I think, what, 2 or 3 times, if not more, Carl. And he's an advocate of mental health. Let's make sure that we get Carl's microphone situated. We're getting some feedback from him. So I'm going to bring our another guest on. We're going to bring Mike Morde, as in Ford.
That's right. That's right.
How are we doing, Mike?
You did pretty well there, Patrick. You did all right. I'm really glad to be here tonight. This is such an important topic, and I think it's something that we need to keep in the conversation far more regularly than we do. So I really give you a lot of credit for bringing this to the forefront.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Let's see if we can get Carl back on here.
Bring him in.
All right, let's try a microphone again, Carl. We're not hearing anything from Carl, so we're gonna get him all situated, and let's focus with Mike at this point. Mike, tell us who you are and what you do.
Oh my. Well, so I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also an addictions therapist. I'm in private practice in Pittsford, New York, and I've got about 11 years just about in the field between working in community health, both in terms of residential treatment and also having just recently left a long stint for a local hospital system here and working in various outpatient clinics for several years, mental health and especially chemical dependency as well, chemical dependency being addictions work. And it has been one hell of a humbling journey, I would say. Yeah.
So, Mike, what made it such a journey for yourself?
It's for me personally, it started a couple decades ago. I entered therapy myself when I was probably 23, 24. I was getting over a lot of memories that were flooding back to me in regards to some sexual abuse I had experienced when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I was going through a whole lot and tried out a few therapists. Eventually, I found one that I hooked up with pretty well over the years and saw that person for several years until I moved on. But so I've been engaged in therapy as a client for, almost 2 decades at this point. It was something that I fell in love with. I loved doing it. It went from like being a secret, like something I kind of did. I didn't really want to tell anybody. It's kind of experience, the point where I just enjoyed it so much. I got so much out of it that I decided about 10 years ago that I wanted to make a career of this thing. And since then, I've seen quite a lot that is very humbling.
Was it an easy transition, Mike, going from a patient to now a practitioner and helping others?
Yeah. Wow. What a great question. So, Patrick, I thought that the like going from one to the other would have been a lot smoother. But what was neat, it's kind of like what's that movie? The Yellow Brick Road. Oh man, one of my daughters are gonna kill me if I can't think of the name of it. But should I be embarrassed about that, Patrick?
Not at all, Mike.
Okay, all right, that's a relief. So it enabled me to kind of see the person, the man behind the curtain, a little bit, and I had enough other traumas going on in my life at that point throughout graduate school that it really helped put things in perspective. But I was often trying to balance out what I knew as a client and being on that side of the couch versus being on the other side of the couch as well, and learning a whole lot about psychology and how to engage in effective therapy. And I hope to God I'm effective now. I certainly try. But psychology is a very quickly moving field, especially over the last 120 years, give or take. So there's a lot of things for anybody who's interested in this kind of work to be able to stay on top of. But I think it's going in a really positive direction.
Now, Mike, we hear a lot about mental health. We also hear about mental illness. Is there a difference between mental illness and mental health? Is it one and the same? Is it different? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. when I worked behind the scenes, either in residential services or at the hospital, it would be really easy to lean into this conversation and this terminology about somebody who is ill. Like that person is really sick, because they have X, Y, Z. Mental health refers to like our emotional, our psychological, our social well-being, whereas mental illness, I think the CDC considers it to be conditions that affect somebody's thinking, feeling, their mood, their behavior. So that would include everything from like typical mood disorders to what would be considered on the psychosis spectrum. So pretty much anything, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, personality disorders. I mean, it's quite a list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Great question.
well, thanks. Let's see if Carl is ready to go here now.
You guys hear
Carl, are
me?
you set to go?
I think so. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
there we go. There we go. We
You
have
know what?
success.
I'm trying to be fancy and use the Yeti mic, and the Yeti mic let me down. Maybe if they sponsor me or send some money my way, I might put in a good word. I don't know.
Carl, welcome, welcome. Tell our viewers and listeners who you are and what you do.
So yeah, my name is Carl Binger. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in New York State. I want to thank you again, Patrick, for having me on. I met Mike through who was it, Mike? Who I met you
Facebook,
through?
good old Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just so I'm a therapist. Have a Facebook group, private Facebook group called Surviving Depression that I started over a year and a half ago. That I run to kind of give people that freedom, that transparency to talk about mental illness. As a person who's experienced depression in the past, I'm an advocate to help anyone struggling in the dark of depression, especially men, because I think we need to talk about it more. And yeah, and I wrote a book on depression about a year ago too. So I am trying to live it out and help people that are struggling.
Awesome. So
That's
you
fantastic.
mentioned Carl and Mike about men, and today's topic is men and mental health. What do you think is the reason behind men not seeking help when it comes to their mental health?
No small question.
Yeah, I,
What do
if
you think?
I could start if you want.
Sure, go ahead, Carl.
I talk about this and I deal with this a lot with just men I come across, and I think firstly it starts with the culture we live in. Our culture tells us that men can't express feelings. Men cannot be uh, if men act or feel in a way that shows that they're vulnerable, society coins that or deems that as weak.
Mm.
And so society, and we create society, so men have bonded together in a sense to create this stigma around mental illness and specifically depression, or just all of them really. But I talk about depression a lot, and yeah. So if you are, emotional, you're hurt, you express any sort of vulnerability, it comes off as weak or soft, and depending on what context you're in, if you're in the streets or in the hood, and you definitely can't do it there. Like if you say, "Man, I just broke up with this girl and it really broke me down," or if you're weeping and around some guys, they're gonna like, "Yo, like what's up with this guy?" And that's
Mm-hmm.
sad. You have to bottle it up, and what does bottling it up do? Eventually it manifests in violence or other ways. If you can't express sadness, it starts
Yeah.
to manifest in other ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mike, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think for a lot of men, if they try to show emotion, like Carl's saying, you either get minimized, you get ignored, or you get labeled.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, man, I mean, that's I'll speak for myself, right? I use my I and me statements. Um, for me to be able to express myself, even as a therapist this many years in, that's a struggle for me. Like the wiring is not set in hard enough yet that I can just be as open as my partner, for example, or my two daughters.
Hmm.
All these ladies are so inspirational for me because they can just be in touch with their emotional self at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Whereas my tendency is to kind of, if I get really upset about something, I have to fight this tendency to kind of like, kind of get into a tunnel, deal with it myself, eyes down, and try not to take it out too much with passive aggressive comments towards them or being angry about things. Or, it's kind of like squeezing a water balloon. You squeeze it in one direction and it pops out somewhere else, just like Carl is saying. And nobody wants to live like that.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. So, what are some of the things, and before we go into that, because I want you to talk about some of the things that we can do as individuals on our own that can help with our mental health or even with our self care. So I want you to think about that. But what I want the viewers and the listeners to do right now, and this is, although the topic is men and mental health, ladies, you can weigh in too, because you may have, uh, well, you will have a dad, if your dad is still with you, brother, uncle, cousin. You may have a boyfriend or a husband, right? So there may be a male in your life that may be battling mental health.
Mm.
So we want you to be part of this discussion as well. Don't fade in the background because you also can help us as men, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Mike, tell us what are some of the things that you can suggest. And again, we're not from a show standpoint. We're not
Yeah.
telling you to go ahead and do these things, right? What we're saying, these are suggestions, but make sure that you see and seek a professional before you take any of these suggestions. So we just want to make sure that we put that out there.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Um, I feel like one of the most approachable things that you could do about this, I think anybody, is to recognize whenever you are feeling emotional, period. And I don't mean if you feel angry, but also if you're able to recognize when you're feeling pretty satisfied, when you're feeling over the moon. If you
Mhm.
can recognize your emotional self on a regular basis and you're able to make contact with it, especially when you are feeling anxious, for example, if you're feeling guilt, if you're feeling shame, if you can recognize for yourself what that feels like in your body, if it's a matter of like I feel tense in this part of my chest, or if I feel some kind of pain in my back whenever I feel something, um, you can start to kind of see the ball as it starts to get rolling. And then you can say to yourself, I feel anxious. I feel angry. I feel really guilty right now. And the more you can recognize it, get it out there, become comfortable with this very crucial, important part of yourself and your spiritual self, the more there's some room there to have that journey to kind of discuss it, work on it with somebody, and have a meaningful dialogue, if nothing else, with somebody that you love.
Hmm. Great. Thanks, Mike. Carl?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Like with Mike, it starts with you. It starts with the individual, and I am a super advocate of journaling. That has Here's another stigma. Journaling has become a women's thing, or has been a women's thing. Like women diary. Like what you're keeping a diary now, and it's like, dude, journaling
Hmm.
is the most
Yeah.
powerful tool that I've ever encountered in my life.
Wow.
It is amazingly important and powerful if you actually utilize it. And essentially, it's talking with yourself. And if you're spiritual, it's talking with yourself and with God. So
Mm.
you're writing down. So this is actually, depending on where you're at in your stage of life, or your development with your feelings and your emotional life, talking with yourself might be a little frightening, but the more you do it, you become comfortable with it, and you're able to express your feelings very well, very descriptive, and then that prepares you to talk to other people about it. Like, so, hey, you know, I really didn't like the way you made me feel, yesterday. Like, you really offended me, and I want to talk to you about it. It really hurt my feelings. So, with journaling, you can actually practice almost role playing. Like, um, this person offended me so badly, but I'm so angry I can't talk to him today. So, I'm going to go home, calm down a little bit, and write down my thoughts of what I would say to them if they were in front of me right now. When you're able to think it through and calm down a little bit more, then you can go to the person the next day after you've written it out, after you've thought over it a little bit, depending on, if you're spiritual or not, after you prayed over it, and then you go back to that person after you've rehearsed it and you've written it out and you've had that time to actually process your feelings instead of just snapping on someone. You could say, look, I've had time to think about it. You don't have to
Yeah.
tell them you journal. I had time to think about it. I processed it, and this is how I feel. I really didn't like how you did that and how you said that. That really hurt me. And I would like for this to happen going forward, you know.
Mm, I
Great
love that.
information. Great,
Yeah.
great. Can exercise be part of that solution?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very helpful. Like you, I mean, there's so much research on exercise. Just walking, I think it's
Mm,
like walking for 15 or 30 minutes a
Hmm.
day can change your mental health, improve your mental health.
Yeah.
So exercising, a good diet, a healthy, balanced diet, and sleeping well. The big three. I think Megan Clifford has the big four. I forgot what her fourth one is, but I'm like, Megan, you one up me, so
Yeah.
uh, but the big three, exercise, diet, and sleep. If you got those three
Yeah.
things in order, there's a good shot you can be in a better place mentally. But then if that's not in shape, then you got to start looking at additional things, whether it's
Yeah.
talking to a professional
mhm.
and taking on
Yeah.
some of these other techniques to kind of help you through that.
Do you think she meant, I wonder if the fourth one is either related to practicing some degree of mindfulness or maybe a spiritual self. Maybe
It
she's talking to one of those.
absolutely, and it was great. Like it was a great one. It was just like, man, Megan, I've never thought of that one. That I want to add that one at some point, but I didn't want to steal her thunder, So I'm like, Megan, I
Yeah.
like that. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's spot on. I
Yeah.
think that's another aspect of exercise that I appreciate. It's really the go-to, right? You can get your serotonin boost. You can engage in a healthy lifestyle. But I think exercise also provides an opportunity to practice moments of mindfulness. And the more that we can engage in that kind of work throughout the day, the more we'll have an idea of what's going on inside of ourselves, emotionally speaking. And when you really start to grow it, you can pay attention to your mind, how your mind is operating, how your emotions are interplayed with that, and also especially this is kind of a spiritual process, right? You're getting in touch with yourself, you're getting in touch with however you define God to be. You're getting in touch with love.
Mm,
And the more you can do that, the more you can have an altruistic lifestyle where you're giving back to others. You're giving
mm.
back to friends, to family, to whatever religious institution you might belong to. Because ultimately, that's the goal with mental health is to give back and be compassionate towards others.
Oh, wow. Okay. All
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
So, what can you say to with all those things, guys? What can you say if men are out there viewing and listening? What would you tell them right now if they've been battling mental health and they're watching this show or listening to it? What would you say to them that will get them to get up and seek help?
I
Mm.
would I would say like one of the sayings I have on my shirt, the shirts I've had, and I've been stopped in Wegmans a couple of times with these sayings is It takes strength to ask for help. If
Mhm.
you want to know what it means to be a strong human being, it's to ask for help. We all need each other. We've been taught a lot of times that we don't need other people. Do it by yourself. But we need each other. And if you want to know what real strength is, it's unity, it's
Mm,
togetherness. And
mm.
so, if you want to find out what strength is, ask for help, ask someone for help. But we're taught the opposite, do it yourself, don't depend on anyone. And so, if you want to, if you want to man up, then ask for help because that it takes a lot of strength to do that and just to prove that ask any man you know in the past 5 years, how many times have they asked for help? And that's
Mm.
not a sign of strength. By you saying I can do it by myself is not a sign of strength. It's showing that you're trying to prove someone that you are strong in a very wrong way. And so I would say to the person struggling out there, you can actually take the first bold step by asking for help.
Yeah.
That's great, Carl. Patrice, who's also in the field, she says, or even courage to ask for help. So
Exactly,
thanks,
exactly, Patrice.
Patrice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
There's this idea that asking for help is actually a demonstration that you're not willing to give up.
Hmm.
You know, you're still in the fight. You're still willing to get out there and say, you know what? I'm really going through something right now. I don't want to do this by myself. And I think that's probably, I mean, I'm right there with Carl. I think that's fantastic advice. Don't do this thing alone. It kind of goes back to that water balloon. The less you address whether or not we're talking about anxiety or symptoms of depression, or if you've got some concerns related to anger and all sorts of other things, the more you ignore this, the more it's going to show up somewhere else. I think that's especially relevant to some of your audience, Patrick, in terms of like if they want to get involved in starting a business, for
Mhm.
example. Uh, the more you can stay in touch with and have that sense of mental health, like you mentioned earlier, we reviewed that definition. If you can be healthy with yourself, you can start a business in a healthy way as well. And as you start to get off kilter with that, your connection with your clients, the services you provide, they're going to start to get off kilter too. It's a relationship,
Mm.
just like the relationships you have with your family, relationship with yourself, relationship with your higher power, however you define that to be.
That's great. Great information. So let me ask you this, guys, and um, we hear this all the time. Well, not all the time, especially in the church, right? Well, uh, and I hear it from some of my family members too. This is, well, I don't need help.
Mm,
I can pray it away.
Oh God.
What do you say to that, Carl?
Mike, I was gonna say, Mike, you could go first since I've been going first all the time. But I I have a whole, I wrote a like I said I wrote a whole book about. It's not a huge book, but I wrote a book about my experience, man, and it was in a church setting, and I heard that a lot, and it was the worst. It's the worst thing you could do and say if you're going through depression or any mental illness and someone else you know is going through it. The worst thing to say to someone, the very worst thing is to say just pray it up, pray it away.
mm,
Read scripture. That should do it. And it's like we don't take that approach with anything else.
mm,
That's what's so frustrating. It's like, okay, if we're gonna do that, let's do that with cancer. Let's do that with headaches. I have a migraine. Okay, just pray. But
mm,
we don't do that with migraines, right?
mm,
So, but now that we're getting more awareness around mental illness, people are slowly not saying that as much. And it's like, I think when you're in the depths of depression and anxiety, ask anyone who's in the depths of depression or anxiety who's willing to be transparent about it. They will tell you that I've prayed, I've taken drugs potentially, I've gambled, I've done all these risk things to help me feel better, and it doesn't work. So I need something else. What is that something else? Oftentimes it's counseling. Oftentimes it's medication. Oftentimes it's a greater support group that doesn't make you feel bad for asking for help, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And Carl, in terms of people don't know your background, because some people may see that and hear that and says, well, Carl doesn't believe in God, and that's completely opposite,
Oh
because
yeah,
knowing
I
you,
believe.
right?
Oh yeah, I love God, man. I love Jesus, man. I do. I do, man. And he can, like, God can. Like, it's ridiculous to think that God can't heal you. I'm not
Sure.
saying that. Like, God can heal. God raised from the dead. Like, he could do anything, right? But what I am saying is that God has prescribed or have even made provisions for people to be healed in other ways. Like, again, cancer. You have intelligent doctors who, have chemo, come up with all these different drugs to help you fight cancer. Why can't you have the same type of doctors and psychiatrists and therapists to help you deal with depression? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
great. Mike, you want to add to it?
You know, it's funny when you when you asked your question, I thought
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Like,
it looks like Mike is frozen there, so we'll come
okay.
back to
Yeah.
uh, uh, Carl. So let's talk more, Carl, about this particular topic, because
Hmm.
I know your passion, right? I
Yeah.
know how passionate you are, and we're over our time here,
Hmm.
but I
It's
think
all
it's
good.
important.
Hmm.
Um, Tell our viewers, give our viewers your journey, a snippet of your journey, so that they understand where you're coming from.
Sure, absolutely. And I see what Patrice said. Yeah, Patrice, I agree. There's nothing wrong with prayer coupled with doing. And
Yep.
as a Christian who was praying and reading scripture and going to church and trying to do all these things in the past when I went through depression. I went through depression uh, from 2006 to 2009 when I was an undergraduate student at Brockport, and it just progressively got worse. It went from I have no idea what's going on. I'm having panic attacks. Um, my sleep is being disturbed, and I'm thinking it's related to just the stress of school. And I'm like, that's it has to be that. And then it went from, okay, it's the stress of school. No, no, no. It's I think God is putting you in the furnace. God is trying to work some things in you, and it's like, okay, I can kind of vibe with that. I always need refining, so that makes sense. Um, but then it just kept getting worse, and then I started not enjoying things that I normally used to enjoy. Like, I'm a big Buffalo Bills fan, and this is when they were bad, so it was understandable if you were depressed then. But it was like, yo,
Some
I
will say
don't.
they're still bad, but that's another
Oh no,
topic.
so whoever say the Bills are bad
That's another
now,
topic for another day.
wow, they're not watching
Weird.
football. That's all I can say. Bills are Super Bowl favorites right now. Anyhow, I digress. So I was, uh, watching football, having a few drinks with friends, hanging out, reading, all of those things. They didn't just become boring or non-interested. They actually started to become like dark
Mm.
and scary and miserable, and like life started to feel like Carl, if you just died right now, that would be okay because life is so dark. Nothing is fun. Nothing is enjoyable. I remember one time my sister was like, Do you want to go to the Lakers play the Cavs?" It was my first NBA game, and it was LeBron versus Kobe. And let me tell you, I wasn't happy at all. I was depressed. I was like, "Yeah, I'll go," but the whole time I was so sad. Like, it's almost as if everyone in my family died, but they really didn't die.
Mm.
Like I even in that book, I don't think I captured how dark depression is.
Wow.
It's so dark. And this is why people commit suicide. People are like, I remember one time one of my brother's friends committed suicide, and he left behind like a wife and a daughter, and my brother was like, that was so selfish.
Mm.
And I looked at my brother in the eyes and I said, have you ever been depressed before? And he was like, nope. I was like, how dare you
Mm.
say that about someone who committed suicide? You have no, like, life must have been really, really bad if they had a wife and a daughter and they killed themselves. You know what I mean? Like, how
Yeah.
bad was your mental state?
Yeah.
How bad, how dark must it have been if you left behind a wife and a daughter?
Mm.
And people think it's a joke. They think it's fun. They think, he just needs to suck it up. He just needs to. Some people will say, just smoke a little weed. It's like
Mm.
weed cannot get rid of the severe depression. It can't. It
That's
can't.
right.
Wow.
So so my journey eventually, guys, I'll just say without going, like, go read the book if you want to know more. But I'll just tell you, eventually I went on medications. I've been on medication since 2007, and
Mm.
it has been a miracle for me. People will say, "Why don't you go off? You've been good." And it's like, why would I break break what's is fixed essentially? Like,
Mm.
my family's thriving. I'm doing well with them. Why would I go off meds? I'm doing okay.
Mm.
So if I have to be on them for the rest of my life, fine. I'd
Mm.
rather be on meds than to be depressed
Yeah.
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 and a walking, you know, possible suicide.
Yeah.
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 That's
Better
good,
6 feet
Carl.
up than 6 feet down.
Exact. Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
You can
Okay.
take it.
I'm
You
still
can
in
take
that. I'm still in that. I'm a thief. Listen. Laura's still working on me. I'm still in that.
You're
There you go.
borrowing, Carl. You're
I'm
borrowing.
borrowing. Hey, yeah. Hey. I
That's
call it
great.
that too. Then.
Mike, speak to that real quick. I was asking Carl about his journey, and I know you spoke earlier about your journey, a little bit about it, but give us something more about what you went through uh, and where you are now.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick. I think for me it went from a place of struggling with mental illness. For me, I was eventually diagnosed with a form of bipolar. I've
Mm.
been on medications for that myself, really since 2002. um, to really be able to, over the course of time, it's kind of like one of those things where you slowly get educated about something and it starts to trickle, and you start to see other things that are going on as well. Um, so eventually, I was also able to recognize that I've got some pretty strong attachment issues. I had developed an addiction to a drug of my choice as well. And all of this stuff, whether or not it was group therapy I was engaged with, individual therapy, or using prescription drugs from prescribed by my PCP or my psychiatrist, all of these things enable me to go from a place of pain, and even inflicting that pain on myself through self harm that went back to almost 20 years ago, to the point where I've kind of gone in the opposite direction, where I carry that message in an attempt to help other people, hold a mirror up to them and say, hey, if you're going through this, A, you're not alone. B, I want you to know that you're in a safe place right now. And C, if you're willing to talk to me about some of the stuff that you're going through right now, I'm willing to listen. Please share.
Wow, that's awesome, Mike.
Yeah.
Carl, thank you guys. Give yourself Carl, if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they? And Mike, think about that as well. Carl, go ahead.
So you could email me. I'm not really taking new clients right now. I have the Surviving Depression Facebook group that I kind of use as a support for a lot of people. You could join it. It's a private group. If you have any questions, or if you want a free ebook, if you don't want buy a physical copy of my book, email me at carboncounseling@gmail.com, and I will give you a free book.
Mm.
especially if someone's dealing with depression. As I was talking to you, Mike, earlier this week, I truly believe it's better to give than to receive. I believe the more you give, you will actually feel more fulfilled than if you're always getting. So if there's
Yes.
someone out there and it's like, hey, I think my uncle needs this, my cousin needs this, shoot me an email. I'll send it to you right away. I'll send it
Mm.
right there. So,
Mm.
yeah,
Awesome, Carl.
I love that.
So his contact information, Carl is going to put that in the chat here. So
sure.
if you want to put
Yep,
that in there so that everyone can see it, just drop it in the
yep.
chat box. And then, Mike, if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they?
Well, I'm gonna put my website in the chat box as well. So in New York State, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I also do addictions work beyond our state borders. I engage in life coaching, so I do have some other clients in other states. You're welcome to check out my website, MikeMordeCounseling.com. You can reach out to me. I return calls within 2 business days. And I'm taking clients right now on a limited basis. I think I see couples as well sometimes also.
Okay.
Or you can just join me and Carl. We're gonna have coffee in a few weeks. So
Yep.
yeah, come out to Penfield.
Come out. Yep.
I
Yep.
want to thank you so very much, guys. I just put Mike's information out there. I'm going to capture Carl's now. And if you have any further comments or questions for them, you can always contact them. Let me put this information here
Yeah,
so that
please
we
do.
have Carl and we have Mike's. Guys, I want to thank you so very much. This discussion, we can go on forever about this,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I really wanted to take the time out and thank you for being here and
Mm.
lending a hand to this very important topic of mental health, and especially men and mental health. My wife put here is that it's important for people to understand therapy is an investment in yourself. Your therapist is there to guide, coach, and educate you on how to care for yourself through your struggles.
Mm.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
Awesome.
it.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So thank you so very much, guys. I know that you had some other things to do, but you dedicated this time to our viewers and listeners. So thank you. And my hope is that God will continue to bless you and your family, right?
Mm.
Absolutely. Thank
So
you.
Thank
Likewise to
you.
you.
thank you.
Thanks for having us,
Thank
Patrick.
you, Patrick. Yeah,
Not
this is
a
great.
problem.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, we've been talking to Carl Binger and Mike Morde. If you have any questions for them, their information is in the chat. I want to thank you for showing up. I want to thank you for being here. If you're watching it live again or in replay, make sure that you drop us some information. Next week, we will continue the conversation around mental health as we focus on mental health awareness in the month of May. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Peace.